A Netflix original anime with a black samurai in feudal Japan? Yeah, okay, I'm intrigued. So is Yasuke worth the binge? A samurai warrior of African descent must return to his life of sword and violence in order to protect a mysterious girl from dark forces. Before I dive into the review, I found a new Munchie, so if you're interested in hearing about it, stay to the end of this video. So the graphics in this are stunning. Several times throughout the show, there is something on fire and the animation bends the light to simulate the heat that's coming from the flames. It's a nice effect and it's done really well. The backdrops and landscapes are wonderfully painted also. There are forest and woodland scenes that have a tranquility to them, and then the designs of the buildings and the homes, while they're animated, they still look to be authentic. There are a few times also where we see characters on a river or stream, and the water effect is pretty unique in how they did it. When we get to the battle scenes, or really any fight scenes, they can be quite graphic, and the way the animators drew and animated the blood is different, but it's effective. Many times the blood doesn't splatter on the ground like a really thin fluid, but it's more of like this viscous, goopy mess. I mean, it's gross, but it's cool. The color in this is also spectacular. At times the palette is this drab earth tones, and then those are contrasted with bright neon pinks and purples. It's visually wonderful to watch. The opening scene of episode 1 did have me a bit confused at first. I mean, I thought I was watching a samurai period piece, but then there are robots. After my initial shock, I did enjoy this different take on feudal Japan and the samurai story. The mech isn't a large portion, it's just an element of the overall story. So know this going in that this is a reimagining of sorts, and I began to like all the small additions to the story that break it out of being so traditional. The overall story premise is pretty simple. There's a bad guy who wants something, and the good guy is going to fight to protect it. And even though that's simple, there are a lot more complexities that come into play. This is really the story of Yasuke's journey. We watch him experience hardships and tackle challenges too, but his journey is the real impetus for the entire narrative. And it's not just the physical journey, he goes on an emotional odyssey that shows how deep his character actually is. And there are a lot of flashback scenes that let us more and more into Yasuke's life and his background. And these are pieced out and not given all at once. So when they are revealed, they fit a story purpose of what's going on in that present moment. Now, I really could have done without a villain monologue to explain motivations around the middle of the season, but it wasn't detrimental to the overall feeling of the show. I enjoyed the themes of regret that are dealt with, but I also really enjoy how they tackle sense of purpose and duty. Those can come into conflict with other motivations, which then helped to create some good story tension. And the show also deals with the issue of race and how Yasuke becomes a samurai after being a former slave. We see many prejudices that Yasuke faces even when those in power accept him or elevate him to positions of power. Now, while this isn't the central focus of the story, it does weave in and out of the narrative and works to show how Yasuke grows and flourishes despite these attitudes towards him. Each of the 6 episodes are under 30 minutes, so it's really a fast watch. But with that, there is a sense of slowness or patience as the show unfolds. And in case you haven't seen any of the publicity around the show, LaKeith Stanfield voices Yasuke. And before screening this, that fact alone had me excited to check it out. Stanfield has a bit of a reserved delivery in his character, which fits with how Yasuke carries himself. Yasuke is quiet, contemplative, living just this life of solitude, and Stanfield embodies him well and then creates a sympathetic but powerful character. Now, during the show, some of the dialogue is a bit stiff or unnatural. At times, the lines over-explain what we already know. In these times, I prefer more intelligent dialogue that gives the audience credit to know what's going on rather than spell out every single obvious nuance. There are other times too where the dialogue and delivery is just a bit too overdramatic for me. It was meant to be emotional or even funny, but when it would happen, I just cringe. But despite some of that dialogue, the story that builds is compelling and really interesting. The deeper narrative is supported by a lot of violent and bloody action too, and many of the deaths are quite brutal. But I think it's balanced between the drama and the action. The music in this is pretty dramatic as well. There are orchestral pieces as well as more electronic segments that just enhance the emotion that's taking place on screen. And the mix was really enjoyable for me. Now, overall, I had a really good time with the show. I enjoyed the character development for Yasuke that comes throughout the show, and then LaKeith Stanfield gives a really good voice performance for his character. I also think the graphics are outstanding and visually stunning. And while the dialogue could use some work in places, it's not enough to weaken the show to a degree that makes it poor. I am curious if they're going to continue on with the story and then what direction they'll take. I am definitely going to check it out if they do make another season. Okay, so I came across these in the grocery store, and I really just bought them mainly to try because of their name. I mean, it's stroopwafels. Come on. That's just a fun word to say, and it looks like it could be a tasty snack. Now, I've got one out of the package. I mean, it's a thin waffle, and this one has caramel in between the layers. The instructions say to put it on top of your mug of coffee or tea and then let the heat from that warm it up. But for those of us on the go, you can toss it in the microwave or even in the toaster for just a short bit so that it gets the caramel inside all gooey. Now, personally, they're just okay to me. I'm not totally a fan of the texture of the waffle itself. I think that's probably because they're made to be so thin. And that means you don't have a light and fluffy waffle, but nor do you have the crunch like you'd get if you had a waffle cone with your ice cream. So there you go. If you're in the mood for a sweet treat to munch on with your morning beverage, you might want to give them a try. They're not bad. I mean, I wasn't wowed by them, so I probably won't get more, but I don't hate them either, so I will be finishing the box. So for season 1 of Yasuke, there is no sex, brief nudity, some profanity, and a lot of bloody and brutal violence. I give Yasuke 4 out of 5 couches. So if you've been looking forward to this show, I'd love to know what you think of it when you've seen it. Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. Since I've got this out of the package, even without it being in the microwave or something, it's still soft and chewy. It's just not as much. So excuse me while I'm chewing.